Hi there, I'm Zane Franson, VP of Platform and Operations here at Simply Ask, and today I'm going to share with you some of the common ways you can use to execute your processes. Now, when you first log into the platform, you're brought to the My Summary screen. Now, let's start by going to look at the process that we want to execute. To do that, we'll go into Flow, and then we'll go into Process Manager. Now, within Process Manager here, we can see that I have one process that is pre-configured. If we open that up, we can see that it's fairly simple. It just has one step that's going to invoke an API. Now, most importantly, when we're executing our processes is what data are we providing it when we start that process execution? Or in other words, what are the input parameters? So let's look at settings and then go to the expected input parameters. And we can see that we have a couple set up here. We have one which is order item, and that is an anything data type. And we have another which is email, which is an email data type. All right, so let's head back to Process Manager. Now, to give an overview of some of the different ways you can use to execute your process, let's click the settings icon. Let's go into public submission form, and we can take a look here. Now, one of the ways you can use to execute your processes is through a public submission form. Now, these are forms which you can maybe use internally and give to your employees to use who don't have access to log into the Symphona platform. Or it could also be used to the general public. Maybe you want to be able to collect requests and have them submitted and trigger a process. Now to do that, we need to manage the form's branding. So we could click this link, or we can go into Settings, Back Office, and then we have Public Submission Form Branding. Now this branding should be aligned to your company branding. And so if we go to edit this form, we have a bunch of different options, both a light and dark mode. Now, what you can do to configure this is everything from the button color to the accent color to the text color. You can also change the font to align with whatever your corporate standards are. And you can also update the logo, page background, banner color, and so on. But by configuring these few options, it allows you to create a very nice looking form that is customized to your organization. Now this one here, I've already filled out with some options, but you could go ahead and edit this as you see fit. And you will need to do this for the first time before you start using your public submission forms. So let's close out of this and go back to the Flow Process Manager. And let's enable public submission forms. So if by default, these forms are disabled because you may not want all of your processes to be able to be executed publicly from a publicly accessible form. So if we click on Public Submission Form, we can click Enable, and here we can give it a title and description. We can give it a title of something like Submit Order, as this is a order fulfillment process, but again, it could be anything you want. And maybe we'll give it a description of use the following form to submit an order. Now that we've done that, we could enable a password if we want to hide this behind one. But in our case, we're not going to. And we can see at the bottom here that we get a link that's automatically generated that is unique to this form. So we could copy that link and we can save this, and now your public submission form is live. Now to take a look at it, let's log out for a second and let's go to that form. And we can see that we have our public submission form customized with the branding that we had set. This form is dynamic so that it can responsively resize for laptops, desktops, or mobile devices. And we can also see here that we have the input fields that we looked at before, the order item and email. And so if we were to submit this, like providing some input data and maybe an email, we have the ability to then hit the reCAPTCHA and submit it. Okay, so coming back to the process manager, there's other ways that we can also execute our process, not just through a public submission form. Commonly, for example, when you're testing your processes, or maybe just wanting to execute internal processes manually by people who have access to your Symphona platform, what you're going to do is you're going to go into Flow, and you're going to go into Process Trigger. Now within Process Trigger here, we can select the process we want to execute. In this case, we only have one, ordering fulfillment. And then we have a couple options here. Firstly, we could do form entry, where we could define an execution, provide some input data to execute it, where we could have a email And we could define multiple if we wanted to trigger multiple executions at once. And then we can do some other configuration here. Maybe we want this to be a recurring execution, or maybe it executes every hour or every day. And to do that, we'd simply just select down here, maybe daily, every 1 day, for example, or maybe weekly on every Monday. And you can configure that as you see fit. Or you can select only once. And once that's all set up and looks good, you can click Submit Execution, and your process will start executing. Now you also have another option here too, where maybe instead of defining these executions manually row by row, you actually have an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV with all of these defined already, maybe 1,000 different data records that you want to process individually. Well, what you could do is you could go into File Upload here and drag and drop an Excel file with the following columns set on top. And so when you drag them in, you're going to be able to use those to very similarly trigger execution. And again, you would be able to define the execution details in terms of the frequency and if it's recurring, and then submit it. Now, as we're in process trigger here, there's one other thing to note. So if you do schedule executions in terms of recurring executions over and over again, you would see those within this View Scheduled Execution view. So you know what, let's set one up just so we can see it. So let's go set it up order fulfillment. We'll put in some mock data here. And we're going to just set it up to execute maybe every day, every 1 day, and we'll click submit. Now that we've done that, we've set up a scheduled execution because it's going to happen every single day. So we can go and view that, and we can see that we have this right here, where we have the frequency every single day at this time, and it currently ends never. If we wanted to edit it, we could simply open it up and edit the details in terms of the execution data, the frequency, and so on. And we also have the ability to delete our executions if we no longer want them to be executing. Now there's one final tab within Process Trigger here to make note of, and that's Manage Event Triggers, or webhooks. Now some applications that you may be using already today emit events when something happens. So for example, if you have a CRM, commonly they'll have events where when a contact is created, they're going to emit an event which our platform can receive and then start automation on. So to do that, you would simply go to Manage Event Triggers. You can create a new event trigger, and then you can add some different details here in terms of a filter expression, so how you can filter out certain events as they're received, what process you want to execute, and also some event payload mapping. Now the details on how to configure this and the API required for your other system to send data to is detailed within our documentation. Now, to move on to some of the other ways you can trigger a process. Now, processes can also be triggered from automated agents. And so if you go into Converse and into Agent Manager, both within generative agents and structured agents, you're able to trigger processes. And both of those are listed under actions. Now, just to cover structured agents, for example, if we were to edit this agent, we were to drag in an action block, and we were to click on it to configure, we'd see that we have the option to execute a process. And very similarly here, we would select what we want to execute and configure all the details in order to define that execution. And finally, to summarize some of the other ways, if we go to Process Manager, we'll leave this page and we're going to open up Settings again. We can go to How to Execute, and we can see that there are many other ways as well. But most importantly, for the last one that we haven't covered, is executing through a REST API. So Symphona exposes a REST API that you can use from your other systems, or maybe an existing web form you already have on your website, to submit data into the platform and start automating through one of your processes. Now again, we have documentation within our platform to provide you more details on how you exactly can do that for your exact process. So those are all of the common ways to trigger automation. There are many others as well, but those are the most popular that teams use every day in order to optimize their business. So thank you for listening, and best of luck on your automation journey.